Leo Sanchimaniavu Kachimalea tu Itaiwai. Hi everyone. On December 9th, news broke that shook in all of Indian country. A Prairie Band Potawatomi enterprise had quietly entered into a multi-million dollar ICE planning contract. Within hours, tribal citizens across the nation and beyond demanded answers, calling it a betrayal of Indigenous people who have suffered under ICE detention, deportation, and displacement. Today, we're breaking down what happened and why the outrage matters, and how this moment exposes the deeper responsibility that comes with sovereignty. The outcry that began on December 9th. The evening of December 9th marked the beginning of a firestorm within the Prairie Band of Potawatomi Nation, one that would ripple across Indian country within hours. Details emerged that a Prairie Band owned subsidiary and had secured a $29.9 million federal contract connected to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, sparking a wave of anger, disbelief, and grief among community members. Social media erupted, tribal citizens began demanding answers, elders, youth, and advocates denounced the partnership as a violation of the nation's core values and a deep moral transgression. By the following day, December 10th, the Prairie Band of Potawatomi Tribal Council moved swiftly. Senior executives responsible for securing the contract were terminated, but the rage that began on December 9th revealed something much deeper, something that cannot simply be fired away. This moment forced us to confront what it meant when sovereignty, economic development, and colonial systems collide, a contract that crossed sacred lines. The contract awarded by the Department of Homeland Security to KPB Services LLC focused on early phase planning, research feasibility, studies, and conceptual designs for future ICE detention structures. No physical construction was involved, but the damage had already been done. Designing the blueprint of oppression is still participation in oppression. When the public first saw procurement documents and realized the nation's involvement with an agency known for separating families, detaining indigenous migrants, and deporting people to countries that they had never lived, the outrage was immediate. The community understood what outsiders sometimes do not. ICE is not a neutral agency. It is part of a colonial system designed to control, cage, and erase. December 9th, the night the betrayal was named. What happened that night was not just political disagreement, it was heartbreak. For many Native people, especially those whose families and tribal relatives have been detained, deported, or abused by U.S. immigration enforcement, this was personal. Indigenous people across the world recognized the weight of this moment. Yaqui, Zapotec, Maya, Mixtec, Quiche, Nawa, Quechua, Purepecha, and countless other indigenous migrants have been held in ICE facilities, some for months, some for years, and some without translation, legal support, or recognition of their sovereign identity. So when the Prairie Band leaders entered into a contract that fed the ICE infrastructure, even indirectly, the community named it for what it was, a betrayal. Not just to their own tribal citizens, but to indigenous peoples everywhere. ICE as a colonial machine of displacement. To understand why the December 9th outrage was so intense, we must recognize what ICE represents. It is an extension of settler colonialism, a system that has always relied on forced movement, incarceration, disposition, and displacement of indigenous bodies. ICE has detained indigenous migrants who speak neither English nor Spanish, deported indigenous people to nations they were not born in, separated indigenous children from their families, ignored indigenous identity and tribal citizenship, destroyed ceremonial items, medicines, and sacred objects during intake, subjected indigenous detainees to abuse, medical neglect, and death. In a world where colonial borders cut through ancestral homelands, indigenous people are often the first targeted and last protected. So when a tribal enterprise contributes to the design infrastructure of the agency responsible for this violence, even in the early planning stage, it is an act that wounds all indigenous nations. A pattern too familiar. Native cooperations and ICE contracts. The Prairie Band contract did not occur in isolation. Alaska Native corporations, including NANA Regional Corporation, ATHNA Incorporation, and subsidiaries of Bering Straits Native Corporation, have held massive ICE contracts for detention facilities and border enforcement. This is a long-standing tension within Indian country. Colonial systems attempt to turn indigenous nations into agents of their own people's displacement. Some native corporations accepted the financial benefits, others, like Doyon Ltd., ultimately withdrew from immigration enforcement work. Prairie Band's December 10th firings are part of that same reckoning. Accountability came, but healing requires more. On December 10th, Prairie Band moved to fire the executives responsible and publicly acknowledged the contract violated their values. They committed to overhauling federal contracts review process to prevent future ethical breaches. This was the correct step, a necessary step, but community members made it clear. Accountability is not the same as healing, and healing is not the same as justice. To repair what was damaged on December 9th, the nation must reaffirm that sovereignty will not be weaponized against indigenous migrants, that no tribal entity will partner with ICE in any capacity ever again, that economic development cannot come at the cost of indigenous life, the border violence and family separation will never be normalized, that indigenous solidarity extends beyond reservations and state lines. Saying it plainly, working with ICE is a betrayal. There is no soft language for this. Working with ICE is a betrayal to indigenous people of the world. It is a betrayal to those detained, deported, and disappeared. It is a betrayal to our ancestors who survived forced migration. It is a betrayal to our relatives who cross borders today seeking safety. It is a betrayal to the principle of sovereignty that protects life, not cages it. Prairie Band recognized this on December 10th, but the indigenous world recognized it first on December 9th when the news broke. Reclaiming sovereignty from colonial systems. This moment will be remembered as a warning, a reminder that indigenous nations are constantly pressured to participate in colonial systems of violence under the guise of economic opportunity and development. But it is also a chance to declare we do not build the cages that hold our relatives. We do not design the walls that separate our families. We do not contribute to the machinery that erases indigenous people. And we do not betray one another for federal dollars. December 9th lit the fire. December 10th answered it. And the days ahead will determine whether the lessons remain. The events that started on December 9th are a reminder that sovereignty carries more than political power. It carries moral weight when indigenous nations engage with systems built to cage, separate, and erase our own relatives. The harm extends far beyond a contract. It touches the memory of every ancestor who survived displacement and every indigenous migrant suffering in detention today. Accountability began on December 10th, but the work continues. Our future cannot be built on cages, and we must choose again and again to defend life over profit. May this moment be the line we refuse to cross ever again. Tuwa leo sinchimeo koete siavu, in leo sapu enchimak. Chukula.